Hi, my name's David Mansell and I'll be running the Introduction to Video Editing webinar on behalf of Sporting Heritage on the 10th of December. Now before the session, we thought it'd be really useful if we could show you Openshot, which is a program we'll be featuring in depth in the session. You don't need much equipment at all to get started with Openshot. In front of me here, I've got my laptop with nothing more than a mouse plugged in to help me get to grips with the more intricate parts of our edit. Just in case you're wondering, the specs on my computer are listed below. Let's get into it. I'm going to be using Openshot today to edit a quick piece to camera I recorded for Sporting Heritage. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to add your media to the timeline, how to make small edits, and how to add cutaways and branding. Let's take a look at the workspace itself first before we do any of that. Where my mouse is hovering right now is the Project Files section. This is where we keep our media organised. Handily, it is divided up into video, audio, and image files. I can show you those now. In our video section, we have 3 shots. We have a piece to camera, which will require some trimming down, and we have 2 cutaways as well. In the audio tab, we have some license-free music, which I'll be adding at the end of the video to help bring it to life a bit more. In the images tab, we have Sporting Heritage's logo in a PNG format. As the image is in PNG format, we can add it to the video without it obstructing the layers beneath it. I'll show you that later on in the video. At the bottom of the workspace, we have the timeline panel. The timeline allows us to drag media onto the workspace and to structure our video as we see fit. In Openshot, the timeline starts with 5 tracks on it. A track is simply a space for you to insert a piece of media. For the sake of simplicity, I'm actually going to delete some of these tracks now. I do this by clicking the drop-down menu and clicking Remove Track. Right now, I have 2 tracks. I can add more later if I need them. I'm actually just going to rename these tracks to make it a bit easier to keep track of them. I'll call this one Video, and I'll call this one Audio. Now that we've organised our timeline, we can start dragging media into it. I'm going to start up here with this piece to camera. It's always a good idea to name your media something descriptive. Going through your files before editing will make things easier to organise and will probably save you some time in the long run. I can zoom into the track by using this little bar here. This will make it easier to see all the finer details of the edit. You may notice that once I dragged the track onto the timeline, we can see that the media has appeared in the video preview window. This will happen for both video and images. You may also notice that when I selected the media, a window appeared to the side with the media's properties. We'll be looking at this a bit more in depth later. Before we start editing this piece of media, I'm going to right click it and I'm going to click Separate Audio. This will make it slightly easier to edit as I'll be able to see the audio waveform and identify where there's any big gaps that need cutting. If we zoom in a little bit more, we can see that there's a pause at the start and a large pause further on. I'm going to edit these out now. I can do this simply by dragging the left-hand side until the gap disappears. We need to do this for both our video and our audio. With that gap edited out, I can move it back to the start, like this. As this large gap is in the middle of the piece, I won't be able to drag this, so I'll need to use a different tool. Thankfully, on the timeline, we have a razor tool for doing this. If I select the razor tool, this allows me to cut the media where I need to. As I do to the audio, I'm going to do to the video. I've used the razor tool now to cut out this large section of silence. You may find that when you record yourself, you need to take a moment to think of your script or to correct a mistake. It's easy in the editing process to remove such moments. I'm going to join these 2 tracks up together now. As I've cut these 2 pieces of media, there's now what's called a jump cut here. We can see that the shot changes as I move over it. This can make the media look unprofessional, so we'll need to use a cutaway to cover it. To add it to the timeline, we're going to need another track, so I'm going to click the Add Track button. We now have an empty track above where we can add our cutaways. I'm going to drag the cutaway on, and I'm going to place it just above these two pieces of media where I've made the cut. We can see now that this media replaces that jump cut. This is great, but the cutaway is a little bit too long, so what I'm going to do is edit it down slightly using the click and drag method we saw before. If we're adding film cutaways, there's a good chance that those cutaways will also have their own audio tracks. It's probably best to remove these audio tracks, otherwise they'll interfere with the main voiceover. This might distract our listener from the messages we're trying to give. To remove the unwanted audio track, all we need to do is go over to our properties panel which we saw before, and where we have the enable audio option, we just need to click that and select off. When this option is selected, the cutaway will be muted, meaning that we'll only have our audio from our piece to camera. The video is looking great so far, however, there's another gap here, so I'm just going to do the same thing as we saw before with our second cutaway. I'm going to cut the video file here, and remove the unwanted gap. We'll be able to add our second cutaway now here. This cutaway is a screen recording of me viewing a website, and I really want to emphasise the content of the website. To do this, I'm actually going to apply a scaling effect to the media. I do this by selecting the cutaway, and in the properties panel here, I have the option to scale the X and the Y values. I'm going to set the scaling on these values to 1.5. We can see here that the text on the website is now much more prominent than it was before. We don't need all of the cutaway, so I'm just going to cut it here before we switch back to the other shot. This will mean that the video now ends on my address to camera, which is much more personable. Now that we've finished making cuts and adding our cutaways, the final two things I want to do is add some branding and some music. I'm going to do the branding first, and to do that I'll need another new track. I'll click the Add Track button, and I'll take the sporting heritage image, which we saw before, and drag it onto track 4. When using images in Openshot, there is a default length of 10 seconds. We'll need the image to be longer than that, otherwise it won't appear throughout the video. We can increase the length of the image by just dragging the right hand side like this. We want it to match the length of the rest of our video. Like so. We can see that the image is too large, so we'll need to apply some scaling effects to make sure that it's in the right position and it's the right size so it's not obscuring the rest of our video. We can do this by choosing an appropriate value on the scale X and scale Y values. I'm going to choose 0.3. The image is now much smaller, but it's actually in the wrong place. We can adjust this by using the gravity option here. I'm going to choose top left. If we want to adjust this slightly, we can use the location X and location Y values. Let's try something like 0.1. We can see that that looks a little bit more professional and gives us a bit of a margin to work with. We can make finer adjustments too if we need to. The final thing I need to do to my video project is add some music. To do this, I'm just going to take my stock music and drag it onto this empty track here. Despite being an MP3 file, this time the track has shown up without a waveform, so I'm just going to fix that quickly now. I'll right click the track, choose display, and show waveform. As the track is a little bit too long, I'm actually just going to reduce it by dragging from the left hand side. This will ensure that we keep this natural fade at the end of the music. If we were to play the track now, we would find the music is way too loud and it would overpower the voiceover. We need to do something about this, so I'm going to click on the track, and in the Properties panel, I'm actually going to set the volume to a custom level. I'm going to choose 0.05. This will make the track much quieter. I'm also going to add a fade at the start. This will disguise the cut I made to reduce the length of the track. I'll do this by selecting volume, start of the clip, and I'll put a slow fade in. The track should be now at its appropriate volume level. Now that we've completed our edit, I'll need to export the video. I can do this by choosing this red button up here. This will bring up a window allowing me to name my video and choose a destination on my computer. I'm going to name this something descriptive, like Sporting Heritage Video, and I'm going to ensure that this folder path is exactly where I need it to be. You'll also have the option to configure formats down below. If we choose the H.264 MP4 format, this will ensure that the video can be played across many websites in a compatible format. We'll also notice that the video profile is in the HD preset, i.e. 1920 by 1080 pixels and 25 frames per second. With all this done, I'm going to export the video. So there we are. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to Openshot and it's given you a useful insight into how this non-linear editor works. If you do have any further questions though, feel free to tweet them to Sporting Heritage and we'll look at addressing them in the webinar. Until then, take care and we're very much looking forward to seeing you on the 10th of December.